Welcome back to Velshine Rule. Today, hundreds of young adults known as Dreamers rallied outside the Supreme Court. Inside, the justices just finished hearing arguments on the Trump administration's prolonged attempt to terminate that very program that shields 800,000 of them from deportation. Since 2012, the Obama-era program called Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, most commonly known as DACA, has protected the temporary status of certain undocumented immigrants who were brought to the United States as kids before they turned 16. Joining us now, NBC News Justice correspondent Pete Williams. Pete, what exactly is the court considering today?
The question comes down to this, Stephanie. If President Obama could establish this by executive order, why can't President Trump just shut it down without the courts weighing in? That's really the question. Now, the DACA defenders, and you showed them coming out of the court a moment ago and getting a big cheer from the hundreds and hundreds of people out in the Supreme Court, out in front of the court today, so many that they actually closed down the street in front of the court between the Supreme Court and the Capitol building. Their argument is this, that if President Trump had actually done what the law requires, which is to explain why he was shutting it down, he would be forced to own the decision and take responsibility for it. But they say the Trump administration didn't want to do that. It simply said we have to shut it down because it's illegal. So their argument is, number one, it's not illegal. And number two, if the government actually had to own it and take responsibility for it, who knows how this would come out. And besides, the law requires them to do that. But the Trump administration argued today, no, this is an exercise of discretion, just like when the new police chief comes to town and says, I'm going to enforce the drug laws more strictly, or I'm going to not arrest people for possessing small amounts of marijuana. Those are discretionary decisions that can't be reviewed by the courts. So those are the two arguments that we heard today for an hour and 20 minutes. And I think it's fair to say that the court's four more liberal justices are inclined to say that the Trump administration acted wrongly when it shut down DACA by simply saying it's illegal. And the more conservative justices took the opposite view. It did seem that the majority, a bare majority of the court, was willing to agree with the Trump administration here. The only question in my mind is the Chief Justice John Roberts, might he join the liberals, as he did last term when the court said that the government didn't adequately explain why it wanted to put a census question, or rather a citizenship question, on the 2020 census form. That may be what he's thinking. If that's what he's thinking, he didn't give a lot of reasons to think he was going to join with the liberals. So if I had to guess today, strictly on the basis of their questions, I would say the Trump administration is going to win. But I put a big asterisk by that because it's a little bit difficult to tell where the chief is on this.
And if they did, do we have any sense of what would happen to the 800,000 people in the program currently who really the Obama administration encouraged to come out from the shadows and register? They're far more vulnerable now than they were before the program began.
Yeah, without question. In fact, we're looking now at the second generation of some of these folks. Many of these DACA recipients who came here, average age 7, many of them are now parents, and their children are U.S. citizens because they were born here. So that presents a whole different set of questions. To answer your question, what if the Trump administration won? First of all, I don't think we're going to get a ruling until maybe the spring. Secondly, I assume that the government would do an orderly shutdown, as it wanted to do in 2017 when it tried to shut the program down, which is to say that, you have to re-register for this every 2 years. And after that 2-year period lapsed, then those people would be subject to deportation, but not necessarily deported. Even if the government wanted to deport all of these 800,000, it just doesn't have the manpower to do it. The effect would be, of course, is to make them wonder every time there was a knock at the door. And then another question is, if the Supreme Court really does strike DACA down or agree that it's illegal, would that make Congress more likely to do something? And your guess there is as good as mine.
All right, Pete, thank you so much. We're going to turn because I'd like to speak to one of those parents right now. Let's bring in Eliana Fernandez. She's a DACA recipient and a plaintiff in this case being heard at the Supreme Court today. Eliana, you came here from Ecuador as a teenager, and now you have 2 children who were born here in the United States. For those
Correct.
who do not understand, what does DACA mean to you and your family, and what does it mean if it ends?
Thank you. Yeah, so DACA is a program that changed my life in many different aspects. I was able to come out of the shadows, obtain a higher education, purchase a home, but most importantly, be able to stay with my children, because DACA shielded us from deportation proceedings. And that has been one of the greatest things that I've been able to get from DACA. You know, being able to be with my kids, be there for them, make sure that they have their mother by their side. And that's why today I went inside the Supreme Court thinking about my family and thinking about all the families who will be impacted by the decision.
If they were to end the program, what would happen to you? You've got 2 kids born here.
I hope that at the end of the day, the justices rule on the right side of history. If the program was to end, I think it will have devastating consequences for many families like mine. And that will implicate, us not being able to work, not being able to contribute to the economy, and also family separation. And that's why we are fighting really hard for all immigrant families across the country, so that's not the case.
How do you respond to President Trump saying on Twitter this morning that many of the people in DACA are no longer very young, they're far from angels, some are very tough, hardened criminals?
Yeah. Well, Trump will continue to attack the immigrant community regardless. But the way that we're going to respond is by fighting for our community, continue getting an education, contributing to the economy, working, and making sure that, we are the good people that we have always been.
All right, Eliana, thank you so much for joining us. Eliana.
Hey, MSNBC fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there and click on any of the videos here to watch the latest interviews and highlights. You can get more MSNBC for free every day with our newsletters. Just visit msnbc.com/newsletters to sign up now.